I mean, it's a conversation at the end of the day, shifting the conversation around the South African cricket team and that narrative that exists.
These type of conversations are happening in casual commentary at braais at home with people that are just watching the game and those sort of things. And we're wanting to do nothing different than having that same sort of conversation, perhaps just lift the lid somewhat, lift the caliber of the conversation, because we've already peeked behind the curtains or under the covers, if you want to use that term, right?
As soon as you get clear on your motivations and your purpose and your intention, a lot of things can start falling into place.
Yeah.
A lot of things become automated. A lot of things all of a sudden goes, oh, okay, cool, that's how I'm going to do it. So the hows become very clear when the whys are clear.
These guys are hopeful that they're winners. They're not seeing themselves as winners entering it. Despite their having illustrious careers, it's a matter of coming together under the Proteas brand is where things come unstuck in a way.
So the identities of our local cricketing ecosystem has been completely eradicated at a provincial level. There is no longer that sort of, oh, I want to play for this team. Yeah.
It's like taking someone that's not familiar or not comfortable or used to being free and not shown how to handle that freedom. It's the same sort of analogy when we start talking about a playing philosophy of playing with freedom.
All exciting stuff that we're going to get into, right? All exciting stuff that we're going to get into. I'm already like salivating a little bit, to be honest. Right, Russel, methinks we're doing this thing again. Excited for this conversation with the two of you to again just share our thinking, right, and share what we're picking up and where we think we've got it right and where we think we've got it wrong, and where we might be somewhere in between. And so, in particular, what's been really cool offline with the two of you has how we've been sort of sharing videos, in particular, press conferences from Markram and Rob Walters, the coach, as well as sort of some stuff where JP Duminy spoke before the West Indies tour. Textured maybe a little bit by sort of interviews we've seen with Tom Dawson-Squibb, the mental performance coach, or the performance coach in the environment, rather. And so one of the things that's been interesting for me, maybe before we get into you guys, is just there's these ideas around what I notice is sort of buzzwords being thrown around. You tend to see these things in articles as well if you go back. And I suppose as coaches, we always want to try and find like things to hang things on for players, right? But there's a sense in my understanding, and maybe we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it, but there's a sense in my understanding that when we use buzzwords and we don't clearly define them at times, then that can be a bit of a problem, right? And certainly in environments that I've been in, they don't always, the buzzwords don't always get unpacked as into specific meaning of what that means for each individual. And maybe also just at this, before we get into some of these things, say at the start that we do have an understanding that a lot of what we say might be assumption-based, especially if we talk about what's happening inside the environment, right? It's a thumb suck. We're not there. We don't know. And I think that must just be made clear. And the second thing is that we also understand that when players get in front of a microphone, players, coaches, etc., they might be influenced. Who knows, right? They might be following a script. They might be under contract to say things in specific ways. And, we don't know the details of that. At the same point in time, that might be part of what I think we'd want to talk about is what that actually means and the ability to be authentic and real. And then that's good enough, right? That we don't have to be muzzled potentially. I certainly know from some of my interactions with players that there's at times a frustration that they can't just say what they want to say, right? And so, but again, it would be an assumption because we don't know. We can always choose the right words in the right time and the right place, so as to make it seem like we know what we're doing. Cool. I think I'm going to fly over here to Russel and just get his take on sort of what are some of the sort of interesting things for you, and based on our offline conversation, that you feel is sort of relevant that we need to bring into this conversation, maybe feed off a bit of what I've said. Yeah.
Thanks, Jody. One of the things that stood out for me early on when you spoke, these buzzwords that you referred to, I remember and recall when the tenure of these new, the new staff, head staff, Rob Walter, as well as their support staff, accompanying support staff. The big mantra was, I think it might have even been a mandate, but I know certainly amongst the team members, it was inspire and unite. That was the buzzword, if you want to call it that, or kind of the caption phrase. I understand somewhat of the power of that. What it is really, it's a binder for the team to kind of, amalgamate around, something that they can nuance. This is the collective reason and meaning for why they're coming together, and the theme of what the whole group is all about. And so that was quite, it was quite an assertive approach, or something that really spoke to them, and it was drove quite hard. It was echoed, to a large extent. But what was alarming in listening to some of this pre-tournament conversations now, it wasn't actually mentioned at all, which is quite surreal, because this is on the verge or at the start of this World Cup. And surely this is the moment to do the Inspire Unite. Now, I'm not necessarily, I'm agreeing with Inspire Unite. I think there's a lot of gaps and loopholes in that phraseology. And I think but that is clearly one buzzword that was floating about and seemingly has been kind of eradicated, or it's not even a factor anymore. And that is a very disconcerting, number one, that it's not even echoed anymore. And I think also, just if we can keep that point there and maybe unpack the inspiring uniting. I know certainly there's a clear input that the advocate can speak into that in particular, and I can revert back to it. But you were speaking about the sense of freedom as well, the freedom of speech and not being muzzled and things like that. I think one thing that we also had, also as another catchphrase, was the playing philosophy that the players were coming in with. There was definitely the sense of playing with freedom, right? And that is obviously the intentionality behind it is on the field. But if you're not carrying yourself equally with that sense of freedom off the field, it's not something that you can just go and, okay, let me just put my hat on now and go and articulate that freedom there. If you're muzzled and that freedom of speech is not permitted off the field, in a sense, obviously within safe regards of treating others like you want to be treated, and obviously being respectful of others and all those sorts of things, but still speak your mind and have the confidence in yourself to be able to speak freely, then how are you meant to be playing with freedom if you're not like living with freedom off the field, in a sense? And that, for me, are two kind of phrases that I think we can maybe look into, which I think is, it's not necessarily something that's going very well for the Proteas currently.
Maybe just before we get to sort of hear Mafink's thoughts on this, I'm also very aware that because the Proteas brand is not a well-defined brand, right? Because it's not something that, as South Africans, we kind of know what it is, and we get that. It really becomes a case of every new set of coaching staff brings their own set of words, language, whatever they feel like will fit you, right? And driving more their, say, individual agendas rather than, okay, shucks, we're part of this bigger thing, right? I think I shared that article with you guys of Pat Cummins. And what was interesting for me in that article in particular was how he spoke about this is our team, and yes, there's all these sort of people that have come before us, but now it's our time to show how we do that, right? How we do this Australian thing, how we almost like add to the story of it rather than, and he speaks, I think, in that about that ability of players just to come in and be themselves, right? And that's actually a high value that they place in the environment. And maybe that's why Justin Langer was potentially pushed out of that environment a little bit, because he wasn't giving them that sense of freedom that they were longing for. He came in and they needed to be sort of pushed back into the Australian way, reminded of what that is, and sort of then the follow up and the build up on that was like, okay, cool, now we have the freedom to do that because we actually know that we are that. You don't have to keep shoving it down our throats. Maybe it was something like that. Again, some assumptions there, right? And so I certainly agree with that, with everything that you say there. Mafinks, what's your sort of take on where we're at just at this point in time?
Good morning, Jody. Good afternoon, Russell. Yes, look, I've had a look at the videos, and I think at times we kind of like speak to So it's like the media assumes that they are speaking to you as a coach. Therefore, the questions are scripted to trying to find out about your coaching methods, or as a captain. So therefore, the questions are scripted to find out about what you're going to do on the field, right? So what that does is it tends to make people answer in a very professional type of way, where like, okay, you've asked me the questions about coaching, so this is what we're planning to do to win, or these will be the conditions, this is the squad, and whatnot. So sometimes that does kind of like create an almost mechanical type of answer, you know. I remember in the World Cup, Morocco's coach, the Football World Cup, the FIFA World Cup, Morocco's coach kept on speaking about they want to do the Moroccan people proud, you know. His emphasis was always on that look, his team has got some very fine young people who have good values, and they are committed to giving 100% to make the Moroccan people proud. So he didn't necessarily tell you about what formation he's going to start with, or is he going to start this guy in the starting lineup and whatnot. So that also comes with our media needs to pay attention. And now, with that being said, it's those kind of things that again lead us to not being authentic. And what I mean by that is we tend to say things like sport can unite people. I think it's good to inspire and unite. And what I mean by that is when you are an ambassador for your country, you are an ambassador 365 days of the year, right? So you need to be able to perform your job, if you want to call it that. But the uniting is more about we as a team need to be united in the vision. And that vision is always that we want on the field to become good ambassadors for the peoples of South Africa. You understand? So if the team itself, within itself, is inspirational, but it's also united in its goal, then that becomes easier, you see? So nobody comes in with any baggage that they want to transfer to anyone else. So what you mentioned now with the Australians, it's like we are passing the relay baton to you. So I'm running the first 100 meters and I pass it to you. But you take it and you run in your own style, and you pass it to Russel and he runs in his own style, gives it to the finisher, and the finisher finishes. So we might all have different styles of running, but at the end, Team South Africa wins because every generation has passed on the baton, and ideally to become better. You understand what I'm saying? So I think that's the first thing. So often in South Africa, what we do, and this is the law of projection in psychology, we are projecting our biggest fears by highlighting something else to be bigger. So when we win the Rugby World Cup, we say that it's going to unite the nation. When we do something, when we go for the African Cup of Nations, we say Bafana is going to unite us. You understand? But that's the law of projection. So what usually happens is, if I go around saying you are ugly, that means that my biggest fear is to be ugly. Because why do I think being ugly will insult you? So the same thing, if I go around saying that if I win this, it's going to unite us, it means that actually my biggest fear is that we are not united in fact. You see what I'm saying? So we are already not united in the way we live. Remember I said that when you are an ambassador 365 days of the year. So the way we live our lives every day doesn't reflect a first world country. Therefore, when we go to tournaments, let's take just England's team. The roads in England are better than the roads in South Africa. I mean, if you've been to wherever the ANC was governing, there are almost no roads. I'm not talking about Cape Town or George or wherever. No, most of the country, the roads are poor. So the roads in America are not well. We didn't even have electricity. In England, they have electricity, right? Our unemployment rate is very bad. In England, the unemployment rate is below 10%. It's one figure. You understand? The quality of education levels, the graduates and whatnot. In South Africa, there was a stat that came out that children from grade 2 and younger can't read to comprehend. In England, they can read to comprehend. So already when we walk on the field, we walk as inferiors before we even start to play. You understand? You can even see England has a lot of sponsors. We struggle, like we have to scrap together a sponsor. So in every aspect of what we are doing away from the field, we are already coming into the field as inferiors. Therefore, psychologically, we have to do a lot more to dominate the opposition. You understand? So in Australia, they don't have load shedding, they don't have potholes and that kind of stuff. Yes, they might have their own issues. I'm not papering over the issues. We know in England at Yorkshire, there were issues of racism. So those things are there, right? But I'm talking about just the way we live our lives in general. Are we a people who empower each other? If not, then we are going to window dress and say that after we win this tournament, everybody in South Africa is going to be empowered. We said the same thing with the Soccer World Cup, that this World Cup is going to boost our economy. You understand? Yes. So the point I'm making is that, yes, we want to inspire and unite, but the question is how. The first thing is that we must first be inspirational by empowering everyone in our system. So the guys who coach at under 8 level, under 10, the guys who coach under 15s, the guys who coach in the academies, in the hubs and whatnot, we need to first empower everybody. And then we need to make sure that opportunities are open to everybody. And then we need to get the best of the best people that we can get. And every time we've gotten you in as one of the best, your duty is to empower 3 or 4 others. You see? So if we did that, if we were inspirational in saying, wow, Jody is the provincial coach, and whenever we have a 4-day game, he makes an open invitation to some of the club coaches. Guys, you can come, and on day 1, Russel as a club coach is going to be my assistant. He's going to run one of the warm-ups. He's going to see how I do the team talk. We're going to ask him some few questions. Russ, can you give us a wrap-up of this session of the day, etc.? So we need to first be inspirational in those kind of things. Then we'll be able to be united in the vision. Then we'll inspire other people. Thanks.
Yeah. I'm Russel. I see you're ready to go. I just want to throw in a very simple idea here, right? I keep thinking, if I put my mental performance hat on, where does this sort of sit for me? And so I think this whole idea of the inspire and unite, and so there's these it's words, right? If I said them, I'll give the order to them in this way. So having, doing, and being. And I think what we tend to do in South African cricket is we try and have something. We want this win at the World Cup, and we want that first. We go, I want to have this thing, right? And we got to win this World Cup, and therefore we have to do some stuff, right? We have to go execute our skills. That's another one of those buzzwords that tend to float around, right? We got to work hard. We got to put in the effort. Those are things that we value in South Africa, right? So there's a lot of this doing stuff happening. Hit the nets. I think we've covered a lot of that in our conversations before. So that I can be something, so that I can prove who I am. Okay. And I think what we're suggesting in every one of our conversations so far is that we've got the order there a little bit wonky, right? The order is not the way that really works, that really gets you to be mentally in a good space. Performance starts taking care of itself, etc. And so a more appropriate order, I think, would be to say being is first. We do that work first. We are a united country first. We are an inspired country first. Why? Because as individuals, I am united. I have dealt with my stuff, whatever it might be, or I'm busy working on it, right? It's a never-ending process. And so because I come from a place of being, I can now do things, and I can do them not as an inferior, as Mafink suggests, right? I can do them because I am whole, because I am complete, because I can show up as the full version, or the fullest version, or the fullest expression of myself that I have at this point in time. And therefore I can have, right? And therefore I can get to that place where so that idea of I'm a winner first, so that I can go win on a cricket field, I think is echoed for me nicely in those 3 words, right? It's being, then I do, then I have. Not I have, or I want to have this thing, and therefore I do things so that I can prove who I am. And I think that's what we try and do in South African sport, is we've well, not all sport, maybe, but definitely in cricket, we struggled with our identity, and so unless we define the being first and we work on that, we can't do. So our doingness is always hollow, and when there's pressure, we crack because we don't have that being foundation to stand on. because we're afraid that our vulnerabilities will show, because we're afraid that, you know, people will see who we really are. We are this inferior, and we're not, right? We're not that, but we have that perception of ourselves. And so we don't want people to see that. And so there's this idea of that Paddy Upton shares in a video, and I'll tag all of these videos below in the comment section below, so people can sort of follow along and sort of see the things that we've been looking at and where we get some of our thoughts or sort of our points of view, where what textures them or what influences them. There's a video of Paddy Upton where he speaks about JP Duminy being in the team environment, being uber vulnerable, you know, in front of everybody. And so there's a part of that in me that sort of really recognizes that, yes, this is a phenomenal thing, right? To be able to be that open in front of people, to be able to share so freely in front of people, is a great thing. It's a phenomenal thing. It's a high level skill to be that comfortable in yourself. To say, if I'm in front of my team, I can say, shit, I fucked up here, right? I stuffed up here. However, I've recently had a couple of podcasts where specifically around people who've had addictions, right? And addictions it's a different animal and a different beast altogether. And if you listen to their stories, what they will explain is that firstly, you've got to hit rock bottom, right? You've got to hit whatever your low is, because unless you've done that, you won't change. And so I don't think our team has hit the rock bottom. I don't think it has. I think we're so good at window dressing, papering over the cracks, doing all of that. We're not shown our rock bottom. We stand on the field and there's some tears and we break down. And I don't think that's rock bottom. It might feel like it, but I don't think it's it yet. Because change hasn't happened. The system hasn't gone and woken up and been shook enough to say we're actually at a rock bottom place. That's the first thing. Then the second thing is that they normally say is you've got to speak with trusted people. It's not something that you would just do openly in a team environment, right? And so that quality of being willing to speak in front of your mates about yourself, I don't know if it's good for performance, right? I don't know if in a performance environment where we're supposed to be sharp, on the edge, ready, and strong in ourselves, strong enough in ourselves, having strong ego strength, so to speak, to show up and be taking every bit of failure, every bit of feedback, and not crumble, not let that affect our solid foundation. I don't know if the vulnerability work happens in the performance environment. I'm not saying it's not important, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be part of an organization or part of a team structure. But I think like, let's say you're in a World Cup. I don't know if before a semi-final, it's okay to say, hey guys, I messed up and I want to have this soft moment, right? I think, and it's not about it being a hard moment either, but I think there's a lot to be said from a mental performance point of view about people being strong enough within themselves that they can take those things as they come and keep themselves orientated towards the process of where they need to go, rather than, oh shucks, now I got to have this big moment here and unpack my life, you know, because I got to be super vulnerable. Because I think the effect that can have on a team dynamic in these crunch moments is it could shake a team potentially, you know, maybe on a camp away from, maybe in interconnected sort of little conversations, you build the relationship before the World Cup. You know, I don't know if that's, so if JP speaks, we'll be talking about these performance connections. Like, what is it that we're actually looking for there? Are we looking for players who now go sit and be like really intimate with each other? Or again, I don't know what those words mean, right? It's buzzwords that gets thrown out all of a sudden. And what does that actually mean? What does it look like? What are we looking for? And the relational connectedness is not something that should be happening on a tour or on a World Cup. It should be there before that. Sorry, I know I'm drifting into maybe potentially a lot of different spaces. Yeah. Yeah. Russel, off to you.
I don't think so, Jody. I think it's good when you talk, because quite a few things can come out and we can probably speak around those concepts. What I like about what you mentioned in the back end there, particularly about the vulnerability approach and the comfort of trying to get performances, you know, those the rapport and the inner depth or the wealth of what the reserves that you have, right? The strengths are going to be put under pressure when you come into any World Cup. Any World Cup is going to be, this is high stakes, high demands, pressures on you. So if you don't have those inner resolve capacities, right, it's going to be exposed anyway, just from the performance of being at that tournament. But now, if you're wanting to use a parallel and saying, we are happy to have safe, vulnerable conversations on the basis of being exposed, but not really addressing the fact that I don't have capacity. Now it becomes a big blowout because you didn't necessarily come in with a wherewithal to handle those pressures, right? But if you have the inner pressures, then it's just a matter of reinforcing it with the relationships that's around you. And I think that's the kind of tricky nature of the approach. If you're going to come in with this performance connections and you're saying, you know, you're going to be facing the heat when you come in there. Do you have the inner capacity already? Are you a resilient person on the inside? Can you endure the challenges that you're about to face into? And how do we then connect with each other so that we can keep drawing out your own inner resolve to overcome, right? If we can support each other that way, then we'll be able to do it collectively. Then we'll feel united in the cause, that we have got synergy in kind of, like they say, brothers in arms. When you go into a battle together or we face a tough thing together, then we can overcome together. Then we feel united for that moment. But if you don't come in with that resolve, when you feel, oh my goodness, this whole expectation of winning this World Cup is actually feeling more burdensome to me, it simply suggests you went in with no capacity and now you're being exposed. And so for me to talk in a vulnerable way is actually making me feel more uncomfortable, because I basically have to admit that I'm feeling less than or incapable or not enough, right? So that's, for me, when I look at what you're saying, and also the pre-tournament conversations, both by the captain and by the coach, it sounds like a tone that almost sounds resigned already. And just, again, these are our assumptions, right? It feels like it's already surrendered or resigned to the fact that we may not have enough. Now, that's a little bit of a fallacy, because talent-wise, they probably got the goods there, right? But it feels like with all the pressures that they walked into the tournament with, the things that Mafinki was just speaking about, the systemic problems that makes these demands on you, right? Are we truly united? Do you really represent, or can you really say Inspire and Unite, which is a fallacy? It's not actually the way it's going to be. You first need to be united, as we say, then we pour in the inspiration. And the more united you are, the more inspiration you get out of it. The same inner drive, external thing that will be echoing all the time. That is something that I potentially think that the coaching staff with Rob Walter has come to a realization too, that this is added pressure now, getting there at the World Cup and seeing how much of pressure. Now, with any pressure, it can either make you, right? It can really liberate you and you discover something that you never thought you had on the inside of you, or it can literally break you. And I think this is where it looks like when they're stepping into it, they're feeling the pressure of this moment, which they were building up towards. But were they really building in the right fashion? Were they building on the inner resolves to actually overcome? Or were they purely just going on the outside resolves and going to the nets and hitting balls and expecting certain things to be rosy on the outside? And that for me echoes what you were trying to say earlier. I don't think necessarily that they are ready to handle the pressures when there's the tapping in or a necessity to go from a deep well on the inside. That for me is the scary part, because as Mafinki was saying, we're coming in with a sense of inferiority, but we are masquerading that we're the top dogs, or we have the capabilities. We do skill wise, but not necessarily mental, mindset wise, or approach wise.
Yeah. I just want to jump on that, maybe before we get to Mafinks, I just want to jump on that idea of what is that you said, how the sort of the coach and the captain in their talks, how they look, how they come across. I think the tone, you called it the tone, right?
Yeah.
What they come across as. I think it's easy to think that they speak this words of sort of being quietly confident. And I think there's a difference between, and we don't know again, right? But there's a difference between being quietly confident and being nonchalant, not caring, not interested. I mean, there's the one of the videos that I'll post below. If you look at Markham in that, and I don't know, it's a video from Cricket Fanatics. I don't know if he was aware that he was being videoed, right? But he's like, the way he sits there and chews gum and kind of answers the questions in these very generic ways and things that people have always said before, like, yeah, we believe we've, and there's a press conference, I think, as well, that, yeah, we believe we've got what it takes. And it sort of speaks to this idea of it's focused on the doing. It's focused on, you know, we've got guys here that have got experience, that have played all around the world, that have done it. I think Rob says it's time that they do it in the green and gold now, you know, in his interview. And so it just speaks to, it keeps speaking to, like, for me, to almost like, we know that we've got these talented cricketers here. And so now there's just this expectation that what they do, they must just come do here. And then we'll be good. Then we'll be grand. But I'm hoping that what becomes clear for people through these conversations, and certainly something I'm aware of, is that that's where we fall short. That is exactly one of the big cruxes of where we fall short as a team, is that we make it about the individuals. We make it about, you've done this, so you can do it again. We make it about, yeah, we've got this tag on us and it'll sort of be there, but we'll be okay. We don't have to really sort of pay attention to doing the deeper work. And so we come unstuck, right? Because skill against skill, if you come with this inferiority as your base almost, well, now I'm facing Pat Cummins, you know, and now I have to bowl at David Warner or whoever the next young Australian is, or now I've got to go to these Indian Oaks, you know, and I've got to tackle them at the pointy end of this competition. And I'm not standing on a solid foundation, you know, and I'm standing on a focus on the things, on this doing component. That's what I'm standing on. And if you start comparing that, well, those guys doing has always trumped us. That's the history, right? That's the underpinning sort of storyline, that our skills have come up short. So when we choked, our skills didn't show up. They didn't show up at all in those moments, right? Because that's what part of choking is. Like, you lose sort of mobility of your body. It's just like it's not functioning properly. Now we're talking about potentially panicking. Well, if you're panicking, your skills are not showing up. You're not in the state to perform. And so we keep our focus on, no, we just got to be better at showing our skills, at executing. And then we come up short because in those moments, the skills can't show up. Your state unlocks your skill, and our state is miserable. It's nonchalant or not caring, to the point where, and then if there's a bit of pressure, we've got this inferior sort of base that we're standing up. And so our state at the end of the day, we're not rocking up optimal. We're not. As much as I think we are, we're not, because the focus is not on being optimal as a person first. The focus is just on being optimal as a cricketer, you know, from a skill point of view. Yeah, my thanks. Or advocate, as Russel likes to call you.
Yes, gents, you guys have touched on a lot. You've touched on a lot, and I think if I look at skill for skill, that squad is a skill that's the top squads you'll ever see, right? So it's not a matter of skill, but the way I'm thinking about it is, I wouldn't put myself or anyone else, if I was a member of the squad, under pressure. So I wouldn't focus on that so-called doing that you mentioned. And I'll tell you why. I know this other lady, she says to me that she tells her daughter that, look, remember, as a family, we get good marks at school and at university just for fun. We don't get good marks to prove anything. We actually get good marks for fun. You understand? And that's very liberating, because I heard you guys speaking about being free, playing with freedom. That's very liberating, because it speaks to the beingness that you spoke about. So who you are is enough. You don't need to prove something to us for us to believe that who you are is enough. So you don't have to first become the world player of the year for us to believe that you are good enough to coach the team. You know? So who you are is enough. So who you are is the asset, if you want to put it that way, right? And then I was reading up on something, because I read a lot on cricket. And Rohit Sharma said that, look, he was trying to convince Rahul Dravid not to quit as the Indian coach after the World Cup. The team would like him to continue longer. But he said, no, there are other things more important in life, like family, blah, 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 right? And Rohit says that, look, he won the 2007 T20 World Cup with India, and then he played Test cricket under Rahul Dravid. But then the last time somebody won an ICC event in the Indian squad now was Virat Kohli, the 2011 World Cup. That's almost 15 years ago, right? So even India itself hasn't won much for the last 15 years or 13 years. But Rohit said that I want to, and then he said, no, let me just keep quiet. I don't want to jinx it. So his gift to Rahul Dravid, he would like to lead the team to winning this World Cup. But I think he got a moment of being humble to realize that, look, the world has got 8 billion people. Now, we don't know the cricket population. The truth is somebody in Afghanistan can also bowl quick. Somebody in Scotland, Seoul, I don't know what his name is, he can also bowl 140. Somebody in the Netherlands has the ability to hit you for a few sixes, like O'Dowd and those guys, right? So that's the nature of cricket. But the important thing is, when you are playing in that game, it's about being in the present. Can you be in the present? And that present, you don't know what it's going to look like. You see? You don't know that in that present, you might get a first ball Yorker. Now in New York, on those spicy pitches, you don't know. The team that bowls first might rock you guys down for 160 and chase it down like the United States against Pakistan. You see what I'm saying? So you don't know what's there. So the last thing we would want to do as a nation is to put those men under so much pressure that actually it's the pressure with the expectations on their shoulders that's created more pressure for them than the ball being bowled. You see? So I think that's where we need to focus on the beingness. But that beingness doesn't start at the World Cup. It starts with who we are as. So how are we being every day towards each other? The cricket community in South Africa. How do we live life off the field? You understand? So so for example, if you look at the pathways coaches in England, what they call pathways coaches, they earn and live a better lifestyle than our hub coaches, but they are their counterparts. See? So now that already shows you that we are already on the back foot in that regard. So I think we need to go back to being authentic, to saying, look, to be honest, there are many other cricketers. My thing is being nervous or being vulnerable or whatever, all these things, feeling guilty about that I cost the team. The truth is that none of those emotions are useful for what the team is trying to achieve. So feeling scared, feeling nervous, feeling under pressure, none of those emotions are constructive for what the team is trying to achieve. So it's better that we rather focus on our minds on what do we need to do to become better in the moment that we are in. And we could flip that script around away from the team. So us blaming each other in South Africa that no, those ones are guaranteed to be picked, 3 of them, or those ones at least have 5 of them that are guaranteed to be picked, or that, yeah, you know what, we're only competing for 5 spots. None of those thoughts are constructive to what we're trying to achieve. You understand? So we worry too much about those things that are actually destructive. Instead of worrying about, okay, let's be authentic. Are we empowering everybody? Let's just continue to empower everybody. Let's keep making sure that we are all contributing towards the table so much that there's enough for people to take when they feel a bit under pressure. You see? Because if we are really a team that wants to inspire and whatnot, and all these things, we would have seen that. We saw that already when there was that not fees must fall, Black Lives Matter thing, where we as a country, we are actually the example of what racism is about and what it can do to people. I mentioned the last podcast, the laws of colonialism and apartheid and what they've done to decimate our society, right? So at that point, we were not saying, the world wasn't saying that white people's lives matter less. But because of the law of projection, we heard people saying, but all lives matter. We're saying, yes, all lives matter. If you agree that all lives matter, you should also say that because all lives matter, it's wrong to pay people 2,000 rand a month. Because all lives matter, it's wrong for people to live in the township, in shacks. Because all lives matter, it's wrong for people to stay where there's no service delivery. You see? So again, we always apply the law of projection, but when we are becoming more honest with ourselves, more authentic, that's when we can say, okay, in this moment that we are in, we've got the skills. The skills are not the problem. the important thing is to stay calm, but to move from resistance to acceptance. And I'll tell you what I mean by resistance and acceptance. When we are always trying to prove a point, we are actually resisting against something. So remember when I told you guys offline that everybody's under pressure. If you come from a rich family that teaches you, according to the history, whatever, that you are superior to everybody, how are you going to justify it if a guy from a poor family bowls you out for a first ball duck? Or if you come from a family that says people who look like you are superior, how are you going to justify it if somebody who supposedly looks inferior gets higher marks than you at university and gets the job? You're going to say it's only because of affirmative action, isn't it? Because you have to find a reason. Because every narrative you've got tells you you are superior, right? So everybody's under pressure. If you come from privilege, you are under pressure to prove that privilege means superiority, which means you aren't allowed to lose to a team that you believe is inferior. That's a lot of pressure. But also when you come from a background that says you are inferior in South Africa, you are under a lot of pressure because you must always prove society wrong. You see? So that itself is to resist against something. So you are always resisting to prove that you are enough. And how do you resist that? By doing and having, not by being. You see? But when we go to acceptance, acceptance means that, look, I'm going to go out there today and I'm going to give you 100%. It might not be my day. For whatever reason, the pitch might be such a good batting pitch that not even our best fast bowler will go for under 10 and over like we saw in the IPL. Or the pitch might be such a tough pitch to bat on, like now in the World Cup in New York, that when you are a batter, you'll actually have to bat really well for you to get to 50 against a new ball. You see? So acceptance means that, okay, I see what's in front of me, and I'm aware that me being sad, me feeling sorry for myself, me being angry, me being bitter, me being whatever, what do they call this thing? Resentful and whatnot, is not gonna be constructive to what I'm trying to achieve. So I'm going to look at the situation in front of me and I'm gonna think about, okay, what do I need to do next? Just like when you drive a car and the GPS says, this is point A, this is point B, but when you get here, it says, oops, the road is blocked. It will just give you a detour, but it will eventually get you to your destination. So it's the same thing with us. We just need to focus on each moment, each moment, each moment. And it requires a lot of honesty and it requires the beingness. I love what you said, because I'm somebody who's been through a lot of tough challenges and setbacks. And sometimes people have tried to make me feel less by saying to me, oh, well, look at yourself. You don't have this much money, you know, because at that moment you are struggling a bit financially or whatever. But they couldn't understand why I was calm, because I knew that, look, being depressed, being frustrated that you didn't get the job you wanted to get is not constructive anyway. So why should I be depressed? How is that going to help me? I need to stay calm and think about the next move. So I think that's not necessarily not being vulnerable. It's saying that, look, I do feel the pressure. I do feel the frustration. I do feel this. But I need to but the focus on what needs to be done next is more important than these emotions on this side. You understand? So I think that way we'll be more authentic, and therefore how we answer questions and whatnot, that will reflect that, look, he's aware that there's a lot on his shoulders as a coach or as a captain or whatever, but he's also aware that that's what every other coach and captain is experiencing. Therefore, in his own way, he's going to focus on what needs to be done for the team at that point, nothing else. I think that will take pressure off the coaches, the captains, the players. Everybody else will feel like, okay, we gave it 100%, and that's what matters. So even if the Springboks lost in the finals of the Rugby World Cup, I don't think they would have been respected any less. See, because they were a bit more authentic. So that's it. Yes, thanks.
Yeah, Russell.
Yeah, I think the thing that stood out from you as you were speaking and unpacking that, I mean, also regarding what the coach said, Rob said in that particular interview, was about keeping the players hungry and fresh. I think that's his wording, hungry and fresh. The kind of alarming thing about that is, number one, I'm not quite sure that responsibility falls on the coach per se. I think one of the major fallacies or the approach, it's a flawed approach to think that we keeping someone else hungry and fresh. Freshness, as you're admitting there now, needs to be almost assumed. It needs to be owned by the individual. If you're professional in yourself and you're coming into a highly representative space like the Proteas, like your national team, that in itself is the reward. And therefore you need to, as you said earlier, you need to walk worthy of that reward, right? So being hungry and fresh shouldn't be something that needs to be channeled from some other person, even if it's hierarchy in the system, in the establishment, right? Somebody shouldn't be keeping you hungry and fresh. And I understand maybe he's implying that the environment needs to facilitate that, right? And you can do that. But the point is, if you're not hungry and fresh just by being there and taking ownership of that, finding the best way to amp yourself up, that is an alarming statement for me, because perhaps what you're saying is there are external burdens that they come into this World Cup with that are now like monkeys on their back, and they can't get to actually overcome it, to find that deeper inspiration, that deeper drive. And if therefore these negative emotions could be surfacing, and they're not choosing wisely, not to choose the destructive ones, and then choosing what is the thing that's going to help me push through. And maybe that's the hungry and fresh is talking about. But the alarming thing is ownership needs to be a personalized thing, and then collective ownership makes it so much easier. So that for me is something that also stood out from the conversations that were had. The the responsibility of taking ownership was kind of shifted to someone else. So I heard Justin Lang up. You brought Justin Lang up earlier. He wrote an article because he lost with LSG, and in his article he refers to about some of the coaches and the players, they sweat on the outside, but him as the head coach, he sweats on the inside because he has skin in the game. Him and the owners of that particular team in LSG, they have skin in the game, so they're feeling the pressure on the inside in terms of that. But I'm saying it doesn't necessarily have to be only the head coach. It can be all of them. If everyone takes ownership and feels a little bit of their own skin in the game, then that ownership can be shared and transferred. So in that regard, I think then we have an easier way to handle the pressures that we're all facing. And as we've been pointing out now, the pressures when you wear the green and gold, it's a little bit more intense. You're coming in with a portion of a monkey on your back, a burden, an extra burden, and everything that's a mess. But in order for you to handle that and endure that pressure, you need to be able to share it. It mustn't sit with one or two individuals. It needs to be shared amongst, and everyone must take their share of it and be transparent and honest about their capacity to make a difference.
Yeah, I agree, right? As you're talking there, I'm playing two sort of things through my mind here. The one is the idea of pressure, right? And so I hear what Mafinks also says, that we actually all have this underlying pressure. We do in life, right? Life is a struggle. That's an accepted, well, maybe not everybody accepts it, but that's a reality in life, that life is a struggle. And even that in itself is, I think, unless we understand that things are not going to be easy. Things are always difficult. And so Mafinks, I hear when you speak about the person in the township, and we've got the wealthy people sitting in Camps Bay and Sandton and wherever else around the country. And those like social inequalities that live and exist, I don't know if we can solve that, right? Like, I feel like there's a part of that that's also driven by individuals. Yes, there was the old system that sort of created that disparity. My sense about the current reality with those things is that if you want to get out the township, you'll get out the township. Like, if you really want to. That's been proven by enough people. But I also understand that that's difficult. It's a struggle, right? But at the same point in time, the person in Sandton also has struggle. And so we all have pressure. However, that doesn't mean that excellence can't come out of the township. It's maybe not the same life, right, as the life of the person in Sandton. And I can't sort of say that it is, right? And I can't, in my head, I can't fathom what that type of life is like, right? Because I've not experienced it. By the way, I'm not also the person in Sandton either, right? I'm not that. Having said that, this idea of the pressure, when I think of it from a mental performance point of view, then it gets me to a place where, okay, but what is pressure? What, like, from a performance point of view, what is that actually, right? And so I think in the performance environment, pressure doesn't really exist for me. It's not a thing that is really real. there isn't really a struggle in performance. Why not? Because you spend hours preparing for it. You've spent your whole life. And so when I often work with athletes, one of the things, like a simple question I tend to ask them would be, how many more cover drives do you have to hit before you know you can hit a cover drive? Before you can trust yourself well enough? And so there's this, it sort of speaks to this, so this idea that we believe we're inferior. It's like, no, I've got to go to the nets and hit another cover drive so that I know I can hit a cover drive. When do we get to a place where we know about ourselves enough, about our skills and our abilities to say, I can just rock up, right? I can do my thing. I can go play. And you know what? If I fall short, which I might, we might, then that's feedback. I take the feedback and I move on. But I'm okay. I'm not coming from this place of inferiority. And I think so when it then comes to the pressure, I think pressure on us is heightened because we've got all this other stuff underneath the surface. That's the one idea. And then the second thing was this short little video of Aaron Finch, right? And so it was interesting for me when I saw this video, because he's a complete outsider, right? And he almost, like he says, I don't get it. I don't get that these guys, that none of them have been born by the time all of this stuff got created, the chokers tag, and but yet they come in and they carry that burden with them. They because it's so part of our story. But it's interesting that a person from the outside, it makes no sense to them. And I think what he says in the video, because the interviewer asks him something around the choking tag, like, is that real? And then his word says, well, it is real because they keep talking about it, basically, is what he says. And so I think that speaks volume, right? So if we listen to how we speak as a nation, if we listen how we speak on the couch, if we listen how we speak at the braai, if we listen how we speak in our team meetings, if we listen how we speak in our public addresses where our coaches and our captains are being interviewed, or players get their man of the match awards or whatever, if we listen to that, then I think we hear the undertone that when certain types of questions get asked, we're still answering it in similar ways. We're still trying to avoid similar things. We still sort of we haven't moved beyond things where an Aaron Finch, if you asked him if he's a choker, it would be like I think his brain would potentially be like what the hell type of question is that? Like, it's not a reality in their world, right? And so for us, it's still a reality. We haven't moved beyond. We haven't grown as individuals, collectively as a community, collectively as a society. We haven't grown beyond these ideas. So they're still a thing. So we still talk about them. So they still live within us. And so then they'll still show up out there in the world. And we're waiting for us to win a World Cup so that we can change the narrative, rather than changing the narrative and then the World Cup win takes care of itself. Mafinks, I see your hands. You're ready to go.
Yes, Jody. Thanks for that. So I like what you are saying now, is that, and my thing that I wanted to speak about is that narratives matter, because narratives can literally force people to pick up arms and go kill another people on the other side of the world. You know that? Yeah. Narratives are that powerful, right? So narratives matter. If we have a negative narrative about ourselves, we then do what in psychology they call the golem effect. The golem effect is that if I speak negatively to you and about you, after a while you internalize the things I'm saying about you and to you, and you start to slowly but surely believe them. And then you will behave in a way that affirms those negativities. That's the opposite of the Pygmalion effect. The Pygmalion effect is that the things I say to you and about you are always positive things. So after a while, you start to internalize them, and then you behave in ways that actually affirm those. And then that also further reaffirms those same things that I believe about you, right? So we've got to be careful of the narratives we tell ourselves. And that's why I use the Indian team, that the last time they won a World Cup was in 2011. It's not like they win a World Cup every time there's a World Cup, right? So narratives are very important. And then pressure, like you said, pressure happens when you feel, when you perceive that your skills are inadequate to dealing with the task in front of you, then you'll feel under pressure. Because the opposite of that is being bored or complacent. It's when you feel like, oh, well, my skills are far superior to what you guys are asking me to do. So if I got a team of men to play against an under-12 team, they'll feel bored. They'll feel like, okay, this is very boring. But if I ask that under-12 team to play against an under-19 team, they'll feel under pressure. In other words, they'll feel like their skills are not adequate enough to deal with what's in front of them, right? And sometimes skills are not only physical, they are also psychological as well. They are also mental, you know? So those things are very important. So for us to become the best version of ourselves, like you said, it's hitting more cover drives doesn't necessarily make you a better batter. We just need to operate at a level of courage as the base point. So if you remember the last time I spoke to yourself and Russell, I put my phone more or less in the middle of the screen. And I reminded you that the last time we spoke about fear and love, the two polar opposites in South Africa. Now, the base point to going towards the frequencies of love is courage, right? So below courage are things like fear, shame, guilt, pressure, anger, resentment, those kind of things, hatred, blah, blah, blah. So those are negative energy frequencies. So they have a negative charge, like if it was an electric charge, it's a negative charge. It actually takes away from you, right? But courage is the starting point. Above courage is willingness. Are we willing to try other things? Are we willing to empower other people? Are we willing to go into games knowing that the result could go anyway, but we're going to give our best? So willingness, there's things like peace, there's things like authenticity, all the good energy vibrations that are positive. So those ones, they are contagious. Inspiration, we spoke about inspiring and uniting. Whereas below courage is things like division, narratives that divide, but above courage is unity, it's inspiration, it's all the things that now we are speaking about, the so-called buzzwords that we mentioned, So courage is the cutoff point. Once you no longer have courage, you are moving to these ones now below courage, your energy frequencies. And therefore, remember, one of them is the perception that you are under pressure. The other one is resistance, one of the negative things. So if I'm always resisting that, Jody thinks I'm not good enough, so I must resist that by proving it wrong. That's resistance. It's actually eating away my energy. If I'm always trying to prove people right or to prove them wrong, I'm resisting. But acceptance means that, that's what Jody thinks of me, but it's not important. What's important is what I think of myself. So it's not important that you think I'm a choker or whatever. It's irrelevant. What's important is what do I think of myself, and do I give my maximum every time? Because the other guy in the other team also has a right to express his skills. Somebody I spoke to here in the Bahamas a week ago said, don't impress, express. Said there's no need for you to impress. We were speaking at a webinar, whatever they call it, seminar. And he was telling the people, our audience, that in life you don't need to prove anything to anybody. And his words was, don't impress, express. Just go and be yourself. You understand? Yes. Just like the lady I told you, she told her daughter that, look, don't worry, whether it's matric exams, whether it's university exams, whether it's your board exams as an accountant, as a family, we just pass and get good grades just for fun. So there's no pressure. You don't need to impress me. Just go and express yourself. And that's maybe, it echoes Russell's philosophy of playing as winners, not playing to win. When we play to win, we are trying to get an identity out of the result. So we are trying to impress. But playing as winners means that we are already who we are. All we're going to do, we're just going to express ourselves. You understand? So that's very important. So again, going to what I said, so the halfway point, the cutoff point is courage. Courage is the determinant whether are you operating with positive energies or with negative energies. Because if you're playing with negative energies, the minute the game says to you that, look, you need 19 runs from 6 balls, you might panic. But Carlos Brathwaite and who's this guy, Marlon Samuels, after the post-match interview said, you know what, Stokes is a very ambitious lad. So I went to Brathwaite and said, just hold your shape. He's going to try to bowl a Yorker And because he's trying to prove that he's who he is, he's going to panic and get it wrong. He's going to bowl you some low feet first. Lo and behold, that's what Stokes did. And then they hit him 6-6-6-6. Carlos Brathwaite, remember the name. So at that moment in Carlos Brathwaite's career, he just had courage. He had the courage to say, oh goodness, we need 19 from 6. We could lose this game, but I'm just going to express myself, win or lose. And ironically, that courage allowed him to get over the line, you know. So I think we need to start to operate on that, but not only on the field, off the field as well. Do I have the courage when I'm the head coach to get other people into the space? Do I have the courage if I'm the provincial head coach to invite Jody? Do I have the courage when there's a job advertisement to say, Jody, this came out, it's at another province, or I'm quite happy with my job, but I think you should apply. You know, because remember, jealousy and comparison are also some of the energy frequencies below courage. So if I think I'm in competition with you for a job, competition leads to comparison. And the end product of comparison is jealousy. So that's why now, if I get the job, if you're a jealous person, you'll say, it's only because of affirmative action. If you get the job, I might say, oh, well, it's because it was rigged in his favor. The CEO plays golf with him. You see? So where are we operating in our lives generally? That will give us a sense of what we do, the law of projection, what we project onto the players. And that's why the last time I said, if I'm a coach who's insecure about losing his job, it's going to rub onto the players. They're going to be insecure about not getting a good score or taking wickets because they think this coach will drop us if we don't perform well. Because I'm insecure about my job. So if Jody has 2 bad games, I drop him and I get Russel in. Because I'm hoping Russel is the magic bullet or whatever, the silver bullet. But if I'm secure about my job, I will empower everybody. And I'll even say to Russel, look, those of you who didn't make the starting lineup, don't worry. It doesn't mean that I don't like you. I'm going to do whatever it takes to help you to find your way back into the starting lineup. And then I'll also say to Jody that, look, I know you're a good player. There might come a time where you are off form. But I need you to trust me that if I'm not having you in the team, I will help you to find form again. It might just be Russell's turn. You know, he deserves it as well. He's part of the team. So we must think about where we are operating. That will give us an indication. Thanks.
Yeah. Russell?
Yeah, I just also the thing that comes up in circles for me in my head in listening to our conversations today, but just generally from where we started. The nice thing about this is when we're looking at cricket, there's so much, a lot of deeper things that can be unpacked and we can see as a result of just the game. And that's what we're trying to highlight here. We're trying to highlight that when we look at the game, like we often refer this phrase about it's a microcosm of society and whatever, right? It's very much, there are a lot of things that are underplaying within the game if you look at it for what it is. And this is the type of conversations that we want to encourage, this deeper dialoguing around what comes out through different ways of experiencing. But for the casual observer or for some supporter of South Africa watching South Africa play, and just to superficially remark, oh, we lost, oh, we won, that is not necessarily what the game can offer. It can offer you these deeper conversations and it can move us forward. You know what I mean? It can positively move us forward, because if we're building an identity from the game, then this is the type of level of conversations we need to be having with one another. And if we're not going to mature, then we're going to be like a little spoiled brat that keep wanting to point out, look what I have, and now I'm going to take my stuff away when I don't want you to play. You know, let's just grow up a bit in the way we see the game, and let's engage with each other a little bit more maturely. You know, that's the main thing about this thing, because this is the thing that sparked in my head when I was reminded about this. Just remember, historically, the first game that dismantled the isolation ban of South Africa and therefore developed an identity for us was cricket in 1991. It was the first game. We went to a tour that we weren't permitted to do before because we're banned, right? And we went there with no real identity because we didn't have a flag, we didn't have a representation, we didn't have any democratically led government, nothing yet at that point, right? So cricket played its part in trying to justify or portray this image of us as united, Rainbow Nation or whatever. It kind of portrayed this coming together. But ever since we've been trying to prove something, we try to impress upon ourselves and others, instead of expressing the realities of where we are, that we don't know each other and we need to find our way to each other, right? And it seems like that is what the choker stag is all about. We're never going to get it right until we get real about the fact that we kind of masked an identity together for ourselves. And every time we go into a cricket match, it kind of reflects back to, you started this thing with like a almost like a shallow grab at an attempt of who you are, and you really need to look a bit deeper below the surface, and then start afresh and start a little bit more maturely and redefine the puzzle pieces differently, so that you can actually have a better experience of who you really are, right? And that's why I'm saying this game broke us from isolation, and we are kind of still expressing ourselves as isolated entities, yet we are calling ourselves united, and we are hoping to inspire ourselves to be united, but we're not really necessarily doing that. So when we look at the cricket match, we see all of these subtleties playing itself out, not just the seaming ball or the clean hit of a six or all of those sorts of things. There's lots of that happening, and that's entertaining, no doubt. Ask Herschel Gibbs. He's one of the entertaining type of mentalities. But the game can be a little bit more than that, and it is more than that because it reflects a deeper thing that's at play. And that for me is the fascination of how, from just talking cricket stuff and we're talking about the World Cup and conversations like this, it can go into so many different areas, and it can be so meaningful and contribute to each other's lives, finding resonance and connection around certain concepts. And that's the invitation that cricket offers us. And we mustn't lose sight of that potential. And I think this type of conversations is encouraging more of these type of what I call champ chats to continue happening, so that we don't feel the pressure. We'll operate from courage, and we keep building our nation together, holistically, united, and inspired.
Russell, I think I have so much I want to add on to that, right? But I think I'm going to do an injustice here. I think that's a great place to put a pause on our conversation here, and I want to encourage everybody that's listened to you to go out just for today. You know, the weekend's coming. We've got some South African cricket games coming over this weekend. For today and for this weekend, see if you can start a conversation with somebody and see if you can find some common ground on something that's maybe just a little bit deeper than the normal superficial. That hopefully this conversation has stirred in you some thought or some idea around how you could be different as an individual and how you can play your part a little bit better in uniting and bringing together the country. Because at the end of the day, you're going to go watch this game with your mates. The game's over this weekend with your mates, with your children. And I'm hoping that our conversation helps texture your conversation so that in 20 years from now, we're not having the same conversation. Thanks, Russell. Thanks, Mafinks, for being here as always. I'll see you guys in the next one.
Thanks. Pleasure,
Cheers,
gentlemen.
man.
Take care.
It was good. Cheers.